Let's begin with a story we've told ourselves for centuries. A story about who we are, what we own, and what we rule. Picture it, a primate in the dirt, looking up at the stars, knowing nothing but hunger and fear. Then, fire, the first tool, language, agriculture, cities. We looked at the chaos of nature, the predator that hunted us, the storm that drowned our crops, the darkness that hid our fears, and we decided we would not just survive it. We would command it. We would reshape it. We would become its master. And in that decision, we did not just become builders or farmers or thinkers. We appointed ourselves gods, not the kind of God that creates from nothing out of love or wonder. No, we became a different kind, a God of manipulation. Our first and greatest act of creation was this divine persona. We took the raw, untamed world and declared it our kingdom. Not a home to share, but a dominion to govern. We read it in our holy books. We etched it in our philosophies. Subdue the earth, have dominion. We heard permission in those words, a sacred right. But we chose not to hear the responsibility that should have come with it. We heard only the part that said, "This is yours, do as you will." We reframed our entire existence. The steward became the sovereign. The citizen became the king. The creature became the creator. And with that new title came a new toolkit. No longer just hands to gather, but hands to mold. We stopped asking the river where it wished to flow and dug a canal to tell it where to go. We stopped wondering what the land could sustain and plowed it to demand what we desired. We stopped seeing the wolf as a rival in the hunt and made it a pest to be eradicated from our new garden. Every step was an act of recreation in our own image. We didn't just take a place at the table of life. We built a new table from the bones of the old one and sat at its head. And this was our foundational myth, the myth of dominion. It was the license we wrote for ourselves. It gave us the right to rename things. A forest was no longer a community, an ancient breathing entity. It was timber, a resource. A mountain wasn't a monument of time. It was an ore body. A whale wasn't a consciousness moving through the deep. It was oil and meat. We manipulated the very meaning of the world around us to fit the narrative of our ownership. We convinced ourselves that value was only what could be measured, cut, sold, and consumed. Everything else was scenery or waste. This godhood was intoxicating. Look at our temples. They aren't just pyramids or cathedrals. Our true temples are the endless fields of a single crop, stretching to the horizon, where once 100 species thrived. They are the glittering, artificial canyons of our cities, lit by our own captured lightning. They are the deep scars in the earth, where we reach down and pull up ancient sunlight in the form of coal and oil. We reshaped the very skin of the planet. We rerouted its veins. We are now altering the chemistry of its very atmosphere. We perform this manipulation on a planetary scale, and we call it progress. We call it ingenuity. We rarely stop to call it what it truly is, an assertion of divine will. But a God who only takes and reshapes is a fragile God, a paranoid God. Our dominion was never peaceful, because deep down, in a place we've learned to silence, we know we are not truly sovereigns. We are squatters. The storm still comes. The earthquake still shakes. The virus still finds a way. So our manipulation had to become more than just physical. We had to build a story, a grand sacred narrative, to shield us from that truth, to make our theft look like triumph and our destruction look like destiny. We became gods of the story as much as gods of the stone and soil. And that is where our true power and our fatal flaw was cemented. Because a God who must lie to himself is already dying. Armed with that divine license, that sacred self-granted right, we began our work. Our first and most obvious edicts were written not on stone, but directly onto the flesh of the world itself. This is the most primal expression of our godhood, the raw, relentless manipulation of matter and life. We stood before the living, breathing complexity of nature and declared it a draft, a suggestion. And we took up the pen. Consider the soil. It is not dirt. It is a universe in a handful. A negotiated peace treaty between rock and root, bacteria and decay, a thriving, silent democracy of life. And what did we do? We looked at that democracy and saw anarchy. We saw inefficiency. So we declared martial law. We salted the earth, not with literal salt, but with chemicals that burned away that intricate web of life, leaving behind a sterile, obedient medium. We commanded it to grow one thing, and one thing only, in perfect soldierly rows. We traded a resilient, whispering community for a silent, fragile monocrop. We exchanged a forest's wisdom for a field's obedience. That is not farming. That is alchemy. We turned a living system into a production input. Then we looked at life itself, the code of it. For millennia, life evolved through a slow, beautiful, brutal conversation between organism and environment. A dance of chance and necessity. We grew impatient with the dance. We stormed the ballroom. We cracked the code. And once we saw the letters, ACGT, we saw them not as a sacred text, but as a language we could reprogram. We took a gene from a fish and spoke it into a tomato. We designed corn to be a vessel for its own poison. We are no longer just breeders, selecting from what is. We are architects, writing what never was. We play with the very syllables of creation, stitching together chimeras in sterile labs, commanding cells to forget their original purpose and serve ours. We are editing the book of life, one paragraph at a time, convinced our story is the one that matters most. Look to the skies. We are not content with the weather we are given. The clouds, the rain, the very temperature of the air, all now fall under the purview of our ambition. We seed clouds to squeeze out rain where we desire it. We draw plans to dim the sun itself, to spray a chemical shield into the stratosphere, to cool our feverish planet. We don't ask the climate, we seek to hack it. We treat the atmosphere, the vast dynamic engine of our world, as a faulty thermostat, to be jerry-rigged. This isn't stewardship, it is planetary-scale geoengineering. It is the ultimate act of a god who finds the existing climate inconvenient. Our temples, I said, are fields and cities, but our altars are the minds. We reach into the deep, dark past, into the carboniferous graves of ferns and giants, and we pull up their condensed, blackened remains. We burn libraries of ancient sunlight to power a single N. We crack mountains for the metals in their veins, metals we then forge into monuments to our own fleeting moment. We take elements that slept for eons and whip them into a frenzy of consumption, creating devices of dazzling connection and profound isolation. We have taken the accumulated inheritance of hundreds of millions of years and spent it in a century, like a drunken heir burning furniture for warmth. And the creatures. We reshaped them long before the gene splice. We took the proud wild wolf, and through generations of selective pressure, through manipulation of fear and reward, we created the placid dog. We took the mighty aurochs and bred it into docile, milk-producing livestock. We didn't just domesticate them, we redesigned their very bodies and minds to fit our needs, our aesthetics, our loneliness. We built arcs, yes, but not to preserve, to curate. We decide which species are worthy of life in our new world, the cute, the useful, the nostalgic. The rest, they become ghosts in the ledger, collateral damage in the great project of us. This is the physical reality of our reign. We are constant, unceasing manipulators. We do not adapt to the environment, we force the environment to adapt to us. We see a river and think flood control. We see a forest and think board feet. We see a gene and think patent. We have converted the living, breathing, interconnected biosphere into a series of levers, buttons, and raw materials for our project of civilization. We command growth, we command death, we command the very building blocks of biology. But a God who only knows how to push levers, who only understands force and redesign, is a God who has forgotten how to listen. And a system you cannot listen to is a system you will inevitably break, because every lever we pull is attached to 1,000 hidden wires we never even saw. Our manipulation, of course, had to be defended. It had to be sanctified. A God who acts by raw force alone is just a tyrant, and even tyrants need a story to keep the peace. especially with themselves. So we built a second, more insidious layer of dominion, not over matter, but over meaning. We became the gods of the story, the high priests of the narrative. Our most powerful temple is not made of stone, it's made of words. We had to make the unspeakable speakable. We had to make the unbearable routine. So we created a new language, a lexicon of anesthesia. We don't destroy a forest, we harvest timber. We don't exterminate a species, we see population control. We don't create sprawling dead zones in the ocean from our runoff, we manage agricultural effluent. We don't wage war on the landscape, we engage in resource extraction. These are more than just fancy words, they are incantations. They are spells we cast over reality to dull its sharp edges, to hide the blood on the ledger. We sanitize the violence of our actions with the bleach of bureaucracy. We turn screams into statistics and tragedies into data points on a quarterly report. This sacred narrative stretches far beyond euphemism. It is the bedrock of our entire modern myth. We tell ourselves the story of inevitable progress, a story where every act of manipulation, no matter how destructive, is just a necessary step on a glorious upward path. The bulldozer clearing the mangroves isn't an eraser. It's the pencil of progress, sketching in a new resort, a new port, a new node of commerce. The smoke from the stack isn't poison. It's the breath of industry, the very sign of life in our economic body. We have woven a tale where growth is an absolute good, an endless exponential line on a graph that must never ever dip. We worship at the altar of GDP, a god that counts the exchange of money but is utterly blind to the loss of a wetland. D, the silence of a meadow, the stability of a climate. And when the cracks in this story appear, when the reality of a burning world seeps through the pages of our fairy tale, we have a priesthood ready to defend the faith. We have the merchants of doubt, the high priests of but. They don't have to prove we're right. They just have to whisper, it's complicated. The science isn't settled. Consider the cost. What about the jobs? They manufacture just enough uncertainty to paralyze action. They turn existential crisis into a debate club topic. They manipulate the very idea of truth, making it seem slippery, subjective, a matter of opinion rather than a matter of physics. They protect the narrative by clouding the facts. Our marketing is our gospel. We see an image of a pristine forest on a bottle of cleaner that contains chemicals lethal to rivers. We hear the words green and natural and sustainable slapped onto products born in industrial furnaces and shipped across oceans. We are sold the fantasy of eco-conscious consumption, the idea that we can buy our way out of the hole we're digging. This is the ultimate spiritual manipulation. It allows us to feel virtuous while remaining perfectly complicit. It turns concern into a commodity and absolves us with a receipt. This narrative is our protective bubble. It allows the man in the suit, signing the order to drain the wetland, to see himself not as a destroyer of ecosystems, but as a job creator, a provider, a visionary building the future. It allows the family on a weekend trip, dumping their waste into a river, to see it as just a harmless tiny drop in a vast ocean. The story separates the action from the consequence. It inserts a comforting buffer of abstraction between the steering wheel in our hands and the cliff we are racing toward. We have manipulated language to hide the chainsaw's snarl behind the hum of development. We have manipulated economics to make the priceless seem worthless and the temporary seem eternal. We have manipulated our own senses, surrounding ourselves with a constructed reality of concrete and screen light, so we forget the taste of truly clean air, the sound of a truly silent, unpolluted night. But stories, no matter how powerful, have a fatal weakness. They are not the world. They are just a map. And when the territory itself begins to rebel, when the storms grow fiercer than our fairy tales, when the heat wilts our pretty graphs, when the silent spring becomes a deafening reality, the map begins to burn in our hands. The narrative starts to crack under the weight of the truth it was built to deny. And that is when our most intimate, most desperate manipulation begins. The manipulation of our own conscience. But the lies we tell the world are nothing compared to the lies we tell ourselves. This is the deepest layer of our fortress, the manipulation of the inner world. We are not just gods of the landscape or of language. We are gods of our own minds, performing delicate, constant surgery on our own conscience to keep the divine fiction alive. We are our own most devoted propagandists, our own most credulous congregation. Think of the cognitive dissonance. It is the mental static, the psychic pain that arises from holding two contradictory truths. On one hand, we are intelligent beings. We can see the data, the images, the unraveling threads. We know on some level that an infinite line of growth on a finite sphere is a madman's equation. We know the mountain of plastic, the acidifying ocean, the fever of the atmosphere. We know. And yet, we press the button. We board the plane. We buy the thing. To hold both that knowledge and that action would break a simpler mind. So we become masters of mental compartmentalization. We build walls inside our own heads. We place our concern for the planet in one soundproof room and our daily life in another. We can cry at a documentary about melting glaciers, and then, an hour later, make a choice that directly feeds the furnace melting them without feeling the connection. The wall holds. We are not hypocrites. We are survivalists. Our psyche is performing triage, labeling the vast slow-motion catastrophe as background noise, so we can focus on the immediate, the job, the family, the weekend, the next small pleasure. We shrink the scope of our moral universe to what we can immediately control, because the alternative is a paralyzing despair. We have become brilliant at managing our own awareness, dosing it out in amounts we can tolerate. And we have crafted the perfect psychological shield, the myth of the individual drop in the ocean. What difference can I possibly make? It's the ultimate abdication dressed up as humble realism. It lets us off the hook by convincing us the hook doesn't exist. It ignores the fact that an ocean is made of drops and that systems are shaped by collective behavior. But this myth is soothing. It transforms our powerlessness into a kind of innocence. It allows us to watch the tide come in, one drop at a time, and blame the moon instead of the million hands that each added their own teaspoon. Then there is the sacred timeline of our species' short-term thinking. It is the neurological cornerstone of our reign. We are wired to respond to the line in the grass, not to the ppm of CO2 in the air. Our gods, the markets, the political cycles, our own lifespans, all bow to the altar of the now, the quarter, the election cycle. A problem that unfolds over decades is not a problem. It's a theory. A cost paid by a generation not yet born is not a cost. It's an externality. We discount the future to zero. We sacrifice the long-term health of the system for the short-term hit of dopamine, of profit, of convenience. We are like a god who spends his eternal life fixated on the next 5 minutes, burning his own temple for a moment's warmth. All of this is protected by the ultimate foundational lie, the myth of human exceptionalism, the unshakable belief that we are separate from nature, above its laws, the chosen species for whom the rules are merely suggestions. It is the core tenet of our personal theology. It allows us to see ourselves as managers of a system we are not part of, rather than as cells within a living body we are poisoning. It lets us believe that our intelligence will always invent a way out, a techno-fix, a last-minute deus ex machina, written in code or policy. It is a belief in our own infinite exemption. We are the casino owners who think we can beat the house we built. This internal manipulation is our most tragic feat. We have weaponized our own empathy, our own reason, and our own fear against ourselves. We've turned our greatest gifts, foresight, compassion, abstract thought, into their own prisons. We use our intelligence to build better rationalizations, not better worlds. We use our empathy to mourn abstract losses, while numbing ourselves to the concrete choices that cause them. We stand at the mirror, and we have painted over the reflection. We see a creator, a visionary, a conqueror of limits. We have erased the patient, the dependent, the mortal animal. We have conned ourselves into believing our own press release. And that self-deception is the most dangerous one of all, because a God who believes his own lies has lost the last thread tethering him to reality. He will walk off a cliff, fully convinced the ground will rise up to meet his divine feet. It never does. And here we arrive at the flaw in the Godhead, the fatal crack in our divine machinery. We believe that to manipulate was to control. We believe that pulling a lever meant commanding the outcome. But we forgot, or chose to ignore, that every system we touched, every chain we yanked, was connected to a web of consequences so vast, so ancient, and so complex that our comprehension of it is a child's scribble on the cover of a sacred text. We are not all-powerful creators. We are fragile, feedback-blind controllers in a system that is now feeding back chaos. Our dominion was always a sleight of hand. We simplified the immensely complex to make it manageable. A field of one crop is manageable. A forest of one tree species is manageable. A global market chasing one metric, growth, is manageable. But in that act of simplification, we stripped away the resilience, the redundancy, the built-in peace treaties and backup systems that make life stable. We traded a robust, self-healing network for a brittle, efficient machine, and the first law of machines is that they break. Look at the signs. They are not subtle. They are the system screaming in a language of breakdowns. We call them natural disasters, but there is nothing natural about their scale, their frequency, their ferocity. They are the planet's immune response, the fever to kill the infection. The storms that wash away our coastal temples are not anger, they are physics. The droughts that crack the foundations of our bread baskets are not punishment, they are chemistry. The fires that consume our curated wilderness are not cleansing, they are the inevitable combustion of a tinderbox we spent a century carefully building. These are not acts of a rival God, they are the logical, inescapable outputs of the system we programmed. We are not being judged, we are being answered, and the plagues. We pushed into the last wild edges, unraveling ecosystems that kept ancient viruses in check, and we are shocked when they leap into our herds, into our cities. We built a global circulatory system of trade and travel, our own planetary bloodstream, and then act surprised when a pathogen uses it to spread faster than any in history. We created the perfect conditions for pandemics, ecological disruption, mass livestock cultivation, hyperconnectivity, and then wail at the sky when they arrive. These are not random bolts of lightning. They are emergent properties. They are the system generating chaotic antibodies against the pressure of us. Even our solutions betray our flaw. We see a problem born of overcomplication, and we answer with further complication. The solution to pollution cannot be to filter it better. It must be to not create it in the first place. But that would require us to question the divine right of production itself. So we dream of grand technological Hail Marys, sucking carbon from the air, engineering a hardier bee, building walls against the rising seas. These are the fantasies of a God who believes he can outsmart his own creation's laws, who thinks a smarter lever can fix a broken foundation. It is the logic of the gambler doubling down, convinced the next bet will erase all his debts. Our economic system, the grand narrative we built to sanctify it all, is the most glaring feedback failure. It is a perpetual motion machine designed in a world assumed to be infinite. It requires constant extraction, constant growth, constant consumption on a planet that is very clearly, very finitely not. The system is now hitting limits it was never designed to comprehend. It treats a collapsing fishery as a market opportunity, a water shortage as an investment niche, a climate crisis as a sector for volatility trading. It cannot process enough. It can only process more. And when more becomes impossible, the machine, believing itself divine, doesn't adapt. It begins to consume its own parts. It turns scarcity into speculation, crisis into profit, and society into a battlefield for the remaining crumbs. This is the inevitable destination for a manipulator god, a hall of mirrors. Every lever we pulled was attached to 1,000 hidden wires. We pulled for wealth and got desertification. We pulled for convenience and got a plastic-strangled ocean. We pulled for energy and got a choking atmosphere. We pulled for connection and got a profound, algorithmically engineered isolation. Our control was an illusion. We were not directing the symphony. We were hammering on one key of a vast, organic piano, and now the entire instrument is reverberating with a deafening, discordant roar. We stand atop our crumbling ziggurats, still issuing commands, but the wind is stealing our words. The ground no longer obeys. The manipulated matter is reasserting its own rules. The sanitized language is failing to describe the raw reality breaking through. The internal walls in our minds are shaking under the tremors of actual consequence. We built a God in our own image, clever, short-sighted, and terminally proud. And now, the world we sought to command is teaching us the oldest lesson of all, that true power is not the ability to force a system to obey, but the wisdom to understand how to live within it. The throne is melting, so here we are, at the precipice of our own making. The throne room is on fire, the scepter is bending in our grip, and the crown is cutting into our forehead. We are not facing an external enemy. We are facing the logical conclusion of our own story. The God we built is a suicide king. We have a choice, the first real, unmanipulated choice we may have had in 10,000 years. We can go down with this crumbling deity, clinging to the burning levers of control until the very end, or we can perform the single most radical, divine act left to us, abdication. We must dethrone ourselves. This is not a call for a weaker world. It is a call for a humbler, wiser, more resilient one. It is not about surrendering our ingenuity, our compassion, or our capacity to build. It is about surrendering the foundational myth that we are separate, above, in charge. It is about trading the brittle, terrifying loneliness of godhood for the rich, interconnected responsibility of citizenship. We must step down from the lonely altar and rejoin the community of life. This new path, this new story, begins with a different word. Not dominion, but dialogue. We must learn to listen. We have been shouting commands at the world for centuries. We must now learn the grammar of the forest, the syntax of the watershed, the quiet logic of the soil. We must consult with the systems we are part of, not just command the parts we want. This means embracing complexity, not fleeing from it. It means valuing the pollinator as much as the profit margin, seeing the floodplains function, as vital as the real estate it holds. It is a shift from engineering to ecology, from control to conversation. It means redefining progress. Progress can no longer be a line pointing forever upward on a graph of extraction. It must become a circle, a resilient, sustainable loop. It must be measured in health, in stability, in beauty, in the quiet, enduring abundance of a restored wetland, a repopulated sea, a regenerated topsoil. Our wealth must be counted in clean rivers and silent, star-filled nights, not just digits in a ledger. The economy must become a subset of the ecology, not a force acting upon it. We must build not for conquest, but for continuity. This is a new theology, a theology of limits, a theology of enough. It recognizes that true power lies in understanding boundaries, not in pretending they don't exist. It finds majesty in the symbiotic, not the subjugated. It worships at the altar of interdependence. In this story, we are not the authors of life, but its scribes, not its directors, but its most conscious participants. Our role is not to play God with the building blocks, but to be mindful stewards of the cathedral. The work will be the hardest we have ever done. It will require us to dismantle the stories in our heads, to feel the cognitive dissonance we've spent lifetimes numbing, and to move through it. It will demand we look at the hidden costs, pay the long-deferred debts, and make choices that benefit a future we will never see. It will mean finding courage not in the certainty of control, but in the grace of adaptation, not in the pride of creation, but in the humility of care. We have the tools. The same brilliant, terrible mind that built the levers can learn to sense the web. Our technology, freed from the single-minded pursuit of domination, can help us listen, restore, and heal. Our capacity for cooperation, turned away from the project of exploitation, can become the engine of regeneration. This is our final great manipulation, not of the world, but of our own destiny. We must manipulate the trajectory of our species away from the cliff. We must rewrite the story from the inside out, from a tragedy of hubris into an epic of homecoming. The alternative is to remain the lonely god on the burning throne, whispering commands to the wind as the walls close in. A god who is never a creator, only a consumer. A god who is never eternal, only a brief, bright, destructive mistake in the long memory of the earth. The choice is stark. It is upon us. We can cease to be gods of manipulation. Learn finally to be human.